Right. Hello and welcome to AWS Made Easy. Uh, Welcome back again, Rick, for our GPU bonus episode where we just learned about this new feature, GPU instance optimization and compute optimizer. Now, I was
Absolutely.
remembering from a few days ago when you said that enabling memory is like strapping solid fuel rocket boosters to your recommendation. So I had to modify my introduction a little bit.
Not only that, we're actually talking about a launch over here, which is a new feature
Yeah.
within the AWS Compute Optimizer. So very apt.
Yeah,
It's
it
really
was
entertaining.
it was interesting timing because we recorded that episode just a few days before that launch, and so we couldn't talk about it. But I was so excited about it because this is fundamentally the very first step into the realm of optimizing ML workloads, and so it's kind of funny because we're using ML to optimize ML workload, right? And so it's a little bit circuitous, but it's exciting because the math and the science and the engineering work that went into how to optimize something like GPU utilization is astounding. We have incredible engineering teams. We have incredible data science teams behind the scenes, and I'm humbled and honored to be able to represent their work and show some of that stuff today and talk about it. And I think this is the beginning of what machine learning optimization is going to look like from now on. There's not a lot of companies out there right-sizing or optimizing GPU type resources or ML resources, and we're glad to sort of be leading the way on that.
It's really exciting, not just from an energy perspective or a cost perspective, but even from an environmental perspective. I just saw this article in the Wall Street Journal a few days ago about the footprint of cloud resources, and anyone who's ever mined Bitcoin or played video games knows GPUs are very power intensive. So being able to save that has a very real impact on resource consumption, as you mentioned last week. So it's really exciting.
And the reality,
even in consumer computers, right? So I have my consumer PC over here. The graphics card pulls 400 watts and the CPU pulls 100, right?
Correct.
It's a 4 times increase in load, and that's on a consumer machine. Data center machines, they pull thousands of watts per GPU. It's incredible.
Correct. And when you kind of marry that with the fact that we're barely scratching the surface of what AI is going to do over the next 5 or 10 years. I mean, just making sure that we are optimized right from the get-go is an amazing opportunity and an amazing, step that you guys have taken. So why don't we dive right in, Rick, and let's pull up the announcement so that you can talk through the announcement first, and then we can dive into the details of how all of this stuff works.
Awesome. Yeah. So we picked the G4DN and P3 instances to start with. And so that's not all of the GPU instances that AWS has. We started with these two because we talked to very specific customers that asked us for this support. And so we start small and expand our 10 stakes from there, really, and just prove out the ability to do right-sizing on GPU instances. Also note, some GPU families only have one instance size. So right-sizing isn't really something we can do on them. We intentionally keep the right-sizing recommendations in the same instance family. And so what you're going to see here with this announcement is support for the G4DN and P3. And what that means is if you go into Compute Optimizer and you have G4DN or P3 instances in your environments, you will immediately see recommendations to size them correctly. And that's exciting because, again, GPU instances are very powerful and they can be a little bit on the higher end of the price range of instance choices to pick from. Now, what'll happen by default is you'll see those recommendations, but the recommendations will kind of be like the currently existing recommendations where they're going to recommend size changes for CPU, memory, disk, network, and so on. But if you install the NVIDIA driver, which, there's documentation link here in the announcement, you will then see recommendations. Yeah, that's awesome. So if you scroll down a little bit on this documentation page, you'll see all sorts of information. GPU over provision there. Click on that link, see NVIDIA there, right there. Click that link. So this explains, scroll down a little bit too.
Here we go.
Yeah, there you go. So this explains the new metrics we're using to make right size recommendations. So utilization, memory usage, encoder information, and temperature. So what we're doing is our machine learning model is looking at all of these different data sets. And we used all these data sets across quite a few number of instances to train our model on proper sizing of these resources. So if you turn on the NVIDIA agent, that ML model will then run and provide right sizing recommendations also to change the amount of GPU capacity you have. Now, this is difficult because a lot of these workloads, it's very different than a CPU. When you are running an ML workload, you're generally maxing out that GPU, 100% utilization for as long as it takes to run the job. And that's sort of expected. And that doesn't mean that you are bogging down on performance in the same way that if CPU was 100% for 6 hours, your machine would be on fire and your app would be going down in flames, right? so
correct.
Right sizing GPUs is different, right? Because we like 100% utilization. We're happy with 100% utilization. So
right,
we apply different thinking and different model approaches to how to right size GPU instances because we understand that 100% utilization is a happy place to be in. What is not happy is very low utilization consistently over a period of time. That's not okay because these GPUs are important to us. We need to be either using them or shutting the instance off when we're not using them or downsizing, right? And that's just more of applying the same FinOps and cloud optimization principles that we already talked about to these same instances. So, right, like turning the lights off and you're leaving the room, right? These instances are probably a large portion of your bill if you're using them. And so we need to just be accountable and responsible for them. But then at the same time, if you are running 100% utilization for over 70, 80% of the entire look back period, which by default is 14 days, then we know you are maxing out the utilization of that GPU, and increasing GPU capacity is something that could potentially improve your performance. So there are upsize recommendations here as well. So you likely won't see them unless that GPU is very warm. And it's something that you likely will experience significantly better performance from upsizing.
So Rick, when you do,
go ahead. Sorry, you go.
With so many questions. Okay, so when you're doing optimization of these GPU instances, there's a trade-off, right? There's a trade-off between cost and the time it takes to perform the tasks that are in some queue. Leaving aside the utilization part of it, which is how much time is the downtime on those GPUs, while the rest of the time is kind of running at 100% capacity. It's almost binary in most cases, where for a certain amount of time it's running 100%, and then the rest of the time it's running at 0. So, what kind of a trade-off happens when you're doing these recommendations? Are we going to see a significant change in the runtimes of these jobs, or are they going to end up becoming, or is there a different trade-off?
Yeah, so it depends on each scenario. It depends on what workload is running. If you're running an ML workload, yeah, there's definite potential for increasing your GPU capacity to finish an ML job faster. If you're using maybe other parts of the GPU instance, say you're doing visual effects or visual processing, say you're encoding a video, or you're doing stable diffusion or other sort of visual GPU activities, you're going to see a utilization rate that's not as binary. So we notice this a lot in our data, is that it really is workload dependent. You might have 50, 60% or fluctuating GPU utilization in more like old school traditional GPU workload use cases, where you're using the actual visual capability of the GPU to do things. The newer ML capabilities, right, those tend to be on Tensor Core and TensorFlow enabled GPUs, the newer, more expensive GPUs. You can still run kind of the 3D effects and animation type workloads on the older GPUs, which are cheaper, if you don't need the tensor core capabilities and sort of the newer capabilities that are really effective for machine learning. So it's not always binary. It really is workload dependent. What we've found is we also can't tell you to upsize GPU capacity if you're using something like ML, because we don't know if your app or your job is configured to use multiple GPUs. Right. So we have to be pretty careful when we recommend an upsize recommendation on GPU utilization. We're only doing that if that GPU utilization is just beyond high, right? Because again, we like high utilization. This is, I don't know if it could be even more different, if it is even possible to be more different than CPU utilization, where we hate high utilization, right? And so this is a completely different sort of mindset on how to optimize. Where, like, if you were to optimize CPUs, you like average utilization to be 1520, peak utilization to be 70, right? And everything's on the lower half of your screen. Whereas GPU, you need everything to be way high.
Got it.
So it really is workload dependent, and that's where our ML works pretty diligently to identify all the different patterns that are happening to help identify if this is a candidate to upsize or not.
I imagine there's a lot of simulation type workloads. I had a friend back in college who he was using GPUs, and at the time he had a 3x GPU rig in his dorm that it was solving a certain type of optimization problem where it was basically just matrix math until everything stabilized, and it was 100% utilization on there, almost no CPU utilization. The CPU constructed the initial matrix, and it was GPU at 100% until the numbers stopped wiggling, basically. Yeah. And so I can imagine that's a lot of the types of GPU jobs. Then you said with machine learning, there's more back and forth between the GPU and the CPU, but over time and with so much data, Amazon's been able to profile those type of jobs as well.
Or IO, right? Like we see sometimes IO goes off the charts crazy, and we can upsize that instance, keep the price relatively similar because we're keeping the GPU count the same, which is a bulk part of the price of that instance type, and then increase IO, right? Because there's several instance types or sizes within the family that have one GPU but higher amount of CPU memory IO. So we can size those other elements to improve performance pretty drastically, depending on where that bottleneck lies. So
that's really interesting.
The reverse, because like you said, there's use cases where CPU is near zero. So we have that opportunity to just really shrink the CPU network IO and all of that storage and keep the GPU running and doing what it's doing and save money on the other resource types we don't need to over provision.
Makes a lot of sense. So Rick, a follow-up question on customers actually using this. We just talked about the fact that you need to install the CloudWatch agent, which has the NVIDIA CloudWatch metric gatherer kind of baked into the CloudWatch agent. Now, this particular NVIDIA agent has been part of CloudWatch for 8 months to a year, somewhere around that time. So if someone has already installed the CloudWatch agent in the last year, they should be able to leverage this right out of the box without having to do anything extra, correct? Or do they have to do something different?
That's right. Yeah. If you've enabled the NVIDIA agent, which again, I think we posted the documentation too. If you've already done that, and if Compute Optimizer is enabled, you're off to the races. You're good to go. You'll see those recommendations. There's generally recommendations refresh every day. So since we launched this feature last week, the recommendations have existed in your environment for a week now. If you don't have the agent, quick fix, go install it. You'll see those recommendations about a day later.
Okay. Now, the Compute Optimizer with all your CPU instances typically takes 14 days of data to analyze and create a recommendation. Is that the same time period that you use for the GPU instances as well?
Yeah. Default look back period is 14 days. You can extend that to 93 days with the enhanced infrastructure metrics option that you can enable on your instances, and that'll stretch the historical look back period. I can even do like a little quick back of the napkin math. We take 5-minute samples. So by default, we have 14 days. So, we're taking 12 samples an hour times 24 hours a day times 14 days. We take about 4,000 samples in our default recommendation for CPU, memory, disk, network, and now GPU. If you were to stretch that to 93 days, that would be 288 samples a day times 93. That's 26,784 samples. So the number of samples you feed the ML algorithm is, of course, it's like uncountably higher accuracy or higher amount of data. I can't say accurate because
I mean, you might have seasonality, right? I mean, the most recent behavior is probably the right behavior, especially in the ML kind of scenario where you are going to, run different workloads and keep iterating on your experiments.
I think 93 days makes a lot of sense for production workloads where, they're never going down. They're never really experiencing utilization that's unrelated to customer experience or customer usage of the product, right? I probably wouldn't do 93 days on non-prod workloads or on anything that's not directly serving customer traffic. Enhanced infrastructure metrics is a paid feature. The pricing is very, very reasonable. So it's not something I would really worry about. If you just right size one instance, you're highly likely to pay for the entire feature for workloads. But it's something that I probably wouldn't worry too much about unless we're looking at production workloads.
So let's talk about two edge cases. So the first one is, what happens when you haven't got your CloudWatch agent installed on your instance? Would that continue to offer optimization recommendations? Yeah,
it absolutely does. It does kind of go into a limp mode. It's almost like when you have a check engine light in your car and your car kind of slows down a little bit because it doesn't want to hurt itself. So you get into this situation where without the CloudWatch agent, the recommendations will still exist, but it'll only recommend changes on the utilization values that it can see. So without CloudWatch, we can see CPU, network, and disk. Those pieces of telemetry come for free by default on all EC2 instances. We have all that data with the 5-minute samples that we require for high accuracy. So we will provide recommendations to change or downsize memory, or not memory, but the other ones. CPU specifically will move you to other instance families that will retain the same amount of memory. Because we can't see memory utilization, we will not recommend downsizing memory. And that's back to kind of one of the core tenets of compute optimizers, like do no harm, performance first, right? And so the recommendations are highly accurate and trustworthy, even if you don't have the CloudWatch agent. But the amount of savings increases pretty drastically when you do add CloudWatch, because the number of instances that are out there that you can move to are restricted pretty heavily when we don't have memory data, because we can only size to other instances with the same amount of memory or more. And you'll notice the vast majority of instance sizes that are lower than your current size likely have less memory. And so that blocks off a lot of potential instance types that you would potentially want to migrate to. And so adding that memory metric, we find that it increases the savings amount that you will experience very drastically. And the same will be the case with the NVIDIA agent as well. If you're sizing CPU and memory, that's not the largest cost driver of that instance size. And so without that NVIDIA agent, you will still receive those recommendations to size CPU, network, disk, and memory if you have CloudWatch, and then GPU if you have CloudWatch plus the NVIDIA agent.
Got it. So just going back to that previous question that I had about the time period that it uses to analyze the CloudWatch data to make a recommendation. If, say, I launched an instance today, a week from today, is there going to be no recommendation because I don't have 14 days of data? Or is there going to be a recommendation with whatever time period is available to me now, and then it grows to the 14-day period so when it becomes available?
So we start pending recommendations with the accrual of 30 hours.
Got it.
So we like from a mathematical perspective, we like the confidence metrics we see after 7 days. So that's when I start really looking at the recommendations and taking them super seriously, is after 7 days accrual.
Got it.
Now, pretty much all of the data sources, we have the historical data, except for GPU. If you just installed it, then would have to wait for 7 days or whatever before I start looking at the recommendations and trust them. The thing with GPU usage is if you have, say, 1 day of history, but you know that's the same usage pattern you've always had, go for it. Take those recommendations. save that money, improve your performance, right? Get all the benefits of right-sizing. But from a science and ML perspective, we see the confidence interval on the right recommendations hit just about the top of what's possible after 7 days.
Got it. That's really, really useful. I want to just throw in one piece of information for Cloudfix customers and potential customers. We are very, very excited to announce that Cloudfix will be launching the fixer that we have for GPU right-sizing, which takes recommendations from the AWS Compute Optimizer and some amazing work that you guys have done. We take those recommendations and we implement the fixes, and that's coming out in a week. Or next week, sorry. So we're super excited about this. And I think looking at all of our customers' spend right now, that number is incredibly large. So we're really hoping to make a dent in their expenditure and hopefully kind of have them allocate those to more innovation projects, to more AI and ML workloads, and to more higher order services, which actually provide so much value, where you can move out of the EC2 instance and move up the value chain to a lot of the higher order services that are completely managed, get to serverless so that you don't have to do all of this optimization over and over again or manage it yourself. So, but once again, Rick, thanks for some amazing work that you and your team have done. I can imagine all the hard work and all the math that has gone in behind making sure that these recommendations are incredibly safe. These aren't easy to make. These aren't, trivial. And the fact that you've had to collect an enormous amount of data, test it, and then release it means a lot to us. So thank you so much.
Yeah, it's our pleasure. My team and broader AWS, we love helping customers save money. I think it's one of the best, business values of cloud is that elasticity, using it for your advantage. I think a lot of companies and people like the stretch, the expand, and kind of forget about the contract part of elasticity, right? Like it's not elastic, or your rubber band would snap if you only expand. So you need to contract as part of a healthy operating model for our cloud environments. And AWS is committed to helping customers save money.
We couldn't agree more.
That's really neat seeing that customer obsession, that leadership principles shine through.
Yeah, I love it. It's my favorite leadership principle, no question.
All right. Let's see. Do we have any other? We have a question from the audience from Joseph. Should we put this on screen quickly? Is there any risk in moving too soon? So statistically, 7 days is enough?
Yeah, that's up to you. We see our confidence is really high at 7 days. It's in the high 90% of confidence of the recommendation, and it doesn't change much a whole lot after the 7 day period, unless there's like a huge utilization change that we didn't see in the data set within that next 7 days. So if you know your workload utilization pattern, you know what's going on in that instance or fleet of instances, the 7 day recommendation, I would personally trust if I had a high understanding and background of what the workloads are doing. If you don't, if you're working with another team, another part of your company, and you want higher confidence, I don't think there's a whole lot of harm in waiting for the full 14 days of data to be in Compute Optimizer. But again, that being said, we already have the historical 14 days for CPU memory, CPU disk memory network. So if it's just GPU you're concerned about, you can wait the extra days. If it's CPU or any of the other metrics, you should have 14 days pretty much right away.
Cool. All right, well, thank you, Joseph, for asking the question. And we have a comment from Patrick, and Patrick was also a viewer of your previous episode. He said, must be the right fit for specific types of workloads, very important. So I really like that comment. He said there's different workloads, some of which, and we want that 100% utilization of the GPU. That's what they're built for, and that's, I like how you said that's the healthy use case, right? Where you're getting that 100% utilization, you're really getting your value out of it. And you can look at the other things like network, IO, CPU, memory, all those things holistically.
Yeah, and it's important we use our GPUs, right? If not, return them to the pool. Everybody wants them right now. So,
all right. thank you so much for joining us again twice this week. It's so much innovation happening in the compute optimizer space. We're excited to see what's next, and we will definitely meet at reInvent to
Awesome.
talk
Oh,
about it.
yeah. I should probably mention, if you are interested in attending our reInvent session, it's COP 204.
I'll put that in the banner. COP 204, the reInvent schedule just came out.
Yes. So we are on the reInvent calendar and agenda. You can go sign up, get your seat for that session. I have a feeling it's going to fill up. So I want to provide enough room for everybody. The earlier we get those signups in, the bigger the room they'll give us. So it's an important opportunity to go get your seat claimed for that COP 204 event. We're going to be talking about all the latest improvements to Compute Optimizer and all the right-sizing capabilities and optimization capabilities at AWS. We're going to have some really exciting stuff to show, and I'm really excited to see you all in person again as well. And I know there's a lot of folks in the industry that we've talked to in person at FinOpsX and other events like that, and it's great. It's going to be really great to see everybody again in person.
We're really looking forward to it, and yeah, on the edge of our seat to see what's coming up next. All right, well, with that, I think we should wrap up. Thank you so much for your time, so much this week, and we'll catch up soon.
Thank you once again, Rick. This is a pleasure.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.